Hi everyone, for this demo of CloudGuard Network Security for Azure Virtual WAN, we're going to be covering the topic of Zero Trust Access Control. A few prerequisites or assumptions that you'll want to have for this demo is some prior knowledge of the integration with Azure Virtual WAN. There are other videos on YouTube that talk about onboarding, some other use cases, VNet to VNet traffic and setup and configuration, and then as well as some remote access VPN video. So hopefully this is helpful. Take care, and let's get started. So to begin with, we're going to just review the virtual WAN setup that I have. And if you've watched the previous demo videos, this should look relatively familiar. I'll jump into virtual WAN. I just have a single VWAN with a single hub. I have 3 VNet connections into the hub already. One for prod, one for dev, and one that I've called HR, just to give you a sampling. And there's those 3 connections. If I jump into the hub itself, we can review that configuration really quick. There's the routing intent configuration, sending all internet traffic to our CloudGuard gateways and all private traffic that cover these CIDRs also to the checkpoint, the CloudGuard gateways. And if we take a look at the NVA configuration, we can see our NVA configuration, NVA setup. So once that's set up, and if you have any questions about that, please take a look at those previous videos like I mentioned. If we jump over to the policy screen and jump over to management, this is where we want to show you the benefits of what the access control policy provides to you as you're building out your zero trust policies and configuration. So this is this is not obviously not an end all be all. This is just a sample configuration of something that you could do and kind of give you a flavor of the options available to you. So as you have to answer questions and answer requests, you know that you have these options at your disposal. So starting right from the beginning, let's just go right down the list based off of the agenda. The first thing that's kind of table stakes in regards to any network security device is the firewall function. And obviously the firewall function is built into everything you see here. But if you want to see just the basics, a basic firewall rule per se, you look at like rule number 1, for example. This source is a group of networks. This is my quote unquote trusted networks as defined before. Get the idea. Going anywhere to the NTP service group, and the NTP service group contains the NTP protocols, and there's the ports. So that's your standard firewall rule. And because they're noisy, I'm turning off logging for that. That's the reason why that one's in there. But that you get. I'm not going to bore you with more firewall stuff per se. Outside of that, so the other more interesting things become when you talk about application control and URL filtering. So I have 2 different scenarios or 2 different examples of those in use. So let's look at the human resources section. And by the way, these yellow things are just simply titles and section titles. If you want to create a new one, you simply just do right click, new section title above or below where you've selected. And so under human resources, I have a top level rule that's labeled HR traffic, where I'm using the environment HR tag coming out of Azure. And I can jump over and show you that really quick. So if I take a look at my VNets and go into my VNets and go to my HR VNet and go to tags, you'll see I have the environment HR tag. So anything living in that VNet will get the environment HR tag. And so By default, and this is kind of just a made-up rule, just to give an idea, I'm using a geo rule as well. And we'll come back to that in a second. That's later down the list, but that's the starter rule, the top level rule within that layer. As you get into more detailed options for that, you have that same set of sources going to the internet. And in this case, I've chosen the LinkedIn application, the Indeed application that we have defined, and also the job search and careers URL category. And so we're able to combine both of those, both application control and URL filtering, in one rule. And it also includes those services. You don't need to define those separately in one line. And take that a step further, and actually I'll come back to that in a second, but I also did a time-based rule on this one. So go down to another level in the same idea. I have a separate rule for application control underneath the development section for developers and development access and services. I also have a specific GitHub application for uploading. I am allowing that. And also egress traffic to update packages and do other things. This is as an example. So you're able to combine not only applications, but also protocols. If you want to select additional applications or additional categories, you simply go into that field, hit the plus sign, and you can actually filter by applications and sites and categories separately. So let's just pick applications, for example. And we'll grab Facebook as a pretty common one. There's a whole bunch of Facebook applications and sub-applications for Facebook that you could choose, and that exists for a lot of different applications. Same goes for URL categories. Those are pretty standard. You can also select from a number of different Another feature going down the list of things we mentioned earlier is content awareness. So content awareness is essentially DLP. It's a little bit lighter than a full-blown DLP, but the technology it uses it's doing a very good job of discovering what kind of traffic, what kind of files are exiting potentially out of your environment, or either direction actually. And in this example, I chose source code for Java and Python. And I'm preventing uploads of that outside of the GitHub access that I created above that, to give an example. So if we just jump in there, we can take a look at what's possible or what's available to you in there. A lot of different options. Financial records obviously would be one that you would expect to see. Document files, archives, etc. PCI, data, etc. Next on the list is IPsec VPN and remote access. If you saw the very last version of this under the hoods, we went over remote access VPN, and also the fact that and in previous videos to that, that IPsec VPN termination is not currently supported directly into the hub. That's on I think the longer term roadmap for Azure. Next on the list is identity awareness. I don't actually have identity awareness configured. I don't have AD connected to it, but it's pretty obvious what that would entail. So I did create an access role that would represent what that would look like. So in your access role, you would configure your linking to an Active Directory user or a group, more than likely a group or OU of some sort. And so anything that would be at any person or object that's added to that group would automatically be granted access to this rule, access to this rule or rules dynamically. And so that's the big thing with this example policy, is the majority of these rules, after they're created the first time, they are going to be dynamic. You should not have to go in here and modify unless there's a specific request to modify, obviously. In regards to using the tags that are coming from Azure, or access roles, or updatable objects, or these applications, those get automatically updated as well for you. One of the other things that's on the list is time ranges. I know that may sound kind of silly, but not everybody can do it as well as we do. In this particular rule, I've added a business hours time object. If I double click into that, you'll see the granularity available to you. So I'm able to do not only the hour ranges and days of the week, which is really cool, but if you wanted to, let's say for a contractor that is going to be working a very specific time frame, you can start and stop that on a very specific day and time, and end it at a specific day and time, which is a huge deal in the past. I know, and if you even have the ability in other tools, in the past, without something like this, you'd have to go back and manually disable access if you had a temporary rule in, which is not ideal. Next is what I'm going to simply call dynamic objects. We've already talked about the tags and being able to pull those from Azure. I'll give you an idea what that looks like in full. So if I want to add additional objects, whether it's via tags or just directly to the object itself, hit the plus sign, go to import. In this case, I've already imported or configured my Azure account to be queried. And so I go to my Azure object, and in here you will see all the different things that are available to you to pick from. So you can see the tags that I mentioned before. I can pick VNets directly. I can pick subnets within those VNets as well, and as well as virtual machines directly from the query. And so those can be done automatically, which is pretty powerful. The other one that's pretty cool to mention is the well-known third-party services that are updated on your behalf. And so instead of having to create your own dynamic lists or track what IPs they're using, we'll do that for you. In this particular rule, for example, I've configured the GitHub access for my developers or anything tagged with the development tag in Azure to use GitHub services destination. So those are all the IPs within the GitHub realm. So this is if I mouse over this, you will see that description, which shows that we're grabbing all the IPs on your behalf, combined with the GitHub upload application to allow only uploads to GitHub, not downloads. And then, like I said, this is just an example. You can do whatever you feel be the best fit for your organization. But if I jump in there and take a look at what else is available to you, it's a whole bunch of different third-party services, popular services. So I won't scroll through this list super fast. I want to give you guys time to consume all of these, just to give you an idea of what is possible. And this whole conversation really is just to show you the art of the possible, to steal a term from an Azure architect that we know quite well. So I think just knowing that it's available is part of the battle. Sometimes you just don't know because you don't have time to do your own research. So I want to make sure you guys can see what is possible. So I'm going to click into a couple of these here in a second. I'm going to let you look at this a little bit closer for a second. All right, just to give you an idea of all of the different services that we can key on and you can use in your policies to really restrict that access, to really create that zero trust policy as you see fit, and to restrict it down to only what's needed. Same for Azure. All kinds of stuff. And these are constantly being updated and added. Dropbox services, Windows updates, Zoom, you name it. And you may have noticed in that same section there was a spot for geo, and that's where we also put the geo locations. I know it's not quite as relevant as it maybe used to be because the attackers are smart and they can obfuscate and appear to come from anywhere, but simply restricting it down is also not a horrible idea. It's not perfect, but it's just another option for you as you're building out your policies. And as you can imagine, I picked Antarctica, which actually contains, which even surprised me. There's 5 areas within Antarctica. North America obviously is covered, Europe, Asia, etc. Nothing that shouldn't surprise you. Or nothing that should surprise you. So now that we've walked through a sample policy, I'm just going to go ahead and generate some traffic so you can see what that looks like. The other part of this story is the logs and how good they are. Because, Checkpoint's been known for a very long time for management, ease of use, etc., but also the quality of the logs. It may sound silly, but it makes a difference in a day-to-day basis. So jump over and let's just generate some traffic really quick. And over here, and I'm already doing YouTube. We'll go to yahoo.com on that one. Some east to west traffic, and then this one should, if it's configured correctly, not be able to go pretty much anywhere, and I'll show you why in a second. Alright, so we'll go back to the policy. And we'll just kind of work our way down the rule base here for a second and look at the logs. So if you didn't know this, there's a couple of different places you can look at logs within the Checkpoint management platform. One is right from the policy screen, which is quite handy. You can just click on a rule, and down below there's summary details, but also logs and history for the rule itself, as far as changes that are occurring to it. And so here is the latest ping request that came through. Going from my Devo 1 box to a Prado 1 box east-west, which is going through the hub to get to each other. I generated traffic for the egress traffic here for production, data here. So you can see my Microsoft traffic. Move this over a little bit. Obviously advertisements are huge. There's my Yahoo. More stuff. Google. Yahoo. There we go. Obviously, those websites are noisy. Not to mention the YouTube stuff is quite noisy, as you can imagine. And so the other one that I mentioned was that machine that is not able to get anywhere. So the reason that is, and this is an example of the automation that you could build into your environment, is requiring the tagging to be set correctly. So in this case, I purposely left off the tag, environment dev in this case, and because he's not tagged appropriately, or if it's a malicious actor that comes in and is able to deploy something or something that's not approved by default, because our policy is set in the way that it's set, that traffic is dropped because it doesn't hit any of these rules. We're not just doing a network definition. We're not doing just an IP, etc. We're actually using a dynamic tag object. And so if we go look at our cleanup rule, we should see, there he is, this traffic trying to get out, and the pings, east-west even, are dropped. And simply because he's not tagged. If I was to add a tag, he'd get access pretty much almost immediately, probably within 30 seconds. So hopefully that was helpful. Just want to give you an idea of what's possible. Obviously, I'm sure there's things that I missed or things that people may bring up, but that's where we'll end this conversation for today. Please stay tuned for the next edition of this chat about Zero Trust and the integration with virtual WAN. It'll be on threat prevention. So we talked today about access control. The next talk will be about threat prevention and what we can do there. All right, everybody, take care. Thank you very much.